There's this book that I've written called Nautanki Diaries, and Nautanki is the cycle itself. This is the cycle you're looking at, and I just got on this cycle and went from Bangalore to Delhi in 2010. Now, I'm sure a lot of you must be thinking, 2010, this guy's up over here, 2018, 8 years later, like, what's the big deal? But sometimes I was thinking about this whole thing, and I think, like, some stories take longer to tell than others. While I might have done this cycle ride in 2010, the idea for the cycle ride happened to me in 1995. It was inspired by my hockey coach. I studied in St. Joseph's Boys High School, and it was inspired by my hockey coach, who is called Shikari. So the book is part dedicated to him. And he told us the story about how he cycled from Bangalore to Delhi in 1982. So pretty much that's what the book is about. And I was just wondering, like, how many cyclists over here? Awesome. 1, 2, 3. Great, great, great. So is this the cycle you sort of use? So, yeah, there's a friend of mine over here called Mayura. I just saw her. And I met Mayura when I stopped over at Hyderabad. So the basic plan for the entire journey was, so I knew Bangalore to Delhi, okay, roughly 2,000 kilometers a day. So the plan was every day we'll cycle 100 kilometers. And every 5 or 6 days we'll take rest at the big city that I stopped at. So at Hyderabad, when I took a break, I met Mayura because she was teaching at ISB. And then she obviously knew that I was cycling from Bangalore to Delhi. And then when I told her, come see my cycle, she came and she looked at it and she's like, you're going on this? And I remember that. And also the other part, so now, while the book is my interpretation and my experience of whatever happened on this 22-day journey from Bangalore to Delhi, a friend of mine, when he heard about the entire expedition, he gave me a call. I mean, you have to love guys who don't have jobs. Like, they come up with the nicest suggestions. So he calls me and he says, hey, I heard you're cycling from Bangalore to Delhi. So I said, yes. And then he said, look, I want to come and film the whole thing. So I told him, look, I'm not sure I'm going to complete the journey anyway, so it doesn't really make sense. Because before getting on this cycle ride, I had never done a long cycle ride before. In fact, let's do a little bit of reading from the book. And I was actually first thinking, anyone wants to ask me any questions at all about this trip before we get into the book as such? Because I'll tell you why. I mean, one of the nicest things for me to be a published author is to be able to speak to a bunch of absolute strangers about unique experiences. Like, I don't think I could have this platform with any other thing. So if anyone wants to ask me anything about the journey, about the cycle, about why 8 years, about why, anything, yeah. Same question over here. Why not the return trip? And did you also come back by cycle? Well, actually, no. And if you read the book, you'll know why. So that's one good reason to go and pick up the book. But why not coming back? So when I reached Delhi, I wanted to watch the Commonwealth Games. That was in 2010. So I just wanted to go over there to watch the Commonwealth Games. I did that. I did a little bit of traveling after that. But already on the way from Bangalore to Delhi, I had decided that I'm not doing this coming back again. I had decided. But the funny thing is, the guy whom I got the inspiration from, his name is Mr. Shivrakash, called Shikari in the book. He came back from Delhi to Bangalore. And the second time he did it in around 15 days. The first time it took him 20 days, I took 22. Second time he and his friend came back in 15 days. But I'm the lazy sort. That's why I cycle 2010, book 2018. I take time to do things. So, yeah. So, yeah. Why choose this cycle? So, number one, when I decided to do the journey, I decided to go back to the guy from whom I had the idea. And then it came down to, what cycle do you pick? And he said, pick this one. And I was like, I'm not so sure. But then he began to list out his reasons. He used to call it the poor man's Maruti. Because 1982, I guess it was like different, not I guess, it was definitely different economics then. So then his idea was, it was the poor man's Maruti because with it, you could travel the country. I mean, everyone loves to travel, but like one of the nicest ways to travel has to be on a cycle. So, why this cycle? So the reason number one was because he did it and he advised me to do it. Reason number two, he said, look, if you're going to be cycling 100 kilometers a day, you're going to be spending anywhere between 5 hours and 7 hours in the saddle, cycling. So he's like, since you're going to be doing 5 to 7 hours, think of it as work. And just think of that seat as an office chair. Because then you don't have to slouch over, you don't have to bend down if it's a road bike with like your drop handles and all of that. Third was, he said, very good point, he said, a fancy bike will attract attention. Over here, if someone steals your bike, it's not really going to pinch your pocket. So that was a very good reason also. And the fourth reason, and I wanted to do it myself, was because when I began to like read up on the internet to train for this event, not for this event, but for this cycle ride, I would always read about people talking about the specifics of their bike, about brakes and gears and how much things cost and tubes, and there was so much of science behind the entire cycle. It used to really frustrate me because most of the people whom I see cycling on a daily basis use this sort of a cycle. So I thought to myself, if it's good enough for 99% of the people of the country, then it's good enough for me. So yeah.
We're closely related to it. 99% of the people just commute a few kilometers. The biggest concern with this is gearing. How did you go up and down hills?
So the good thing for me was I met this guy before like going on the cycle ride. He was a cross-country cyclist called Shri. And I went to meet him to get some advice. He'd cycled almost 13,000 kilometers around the country. And he said, what's your route? And I said, Bangalore to Delhi. He said, the good thing is no hills. But Shikari, he had maintained a diary when he went on the 1982 expedition. And he would keep talking about this one section of Ghats in Madhya Pradesh. And I was always very nervous about that 11-kilometer section that I would have to go through because he kept talking about the Ghats and how they were difficult. Actually, what I found out later on the trip was from Madhya Pradesh for the next 300 kilometers, because it's so hilly and wooded, you don't have your typical Ghats like you would see in the Himalayas or in the Western Ghats or anything like that. But they're much slower hills. They don't wind on each other, but there's still a lot of elevation and getting down. But the good thing is, I think, for me, one of the nicest things that happened on the journey was discovering what your body is capable of. And yeah, because I'd never gone on a long cycle ride. And I found, strangely enough, that as the journey progressed, my body began to get stronger and stronger. And while I struggled with the hills, I mean, maybe I should read a passage from the book about, what time is it? I've only got half an hour. Wow, this is so cool. This is so cool. There's a clock over here that tells you how much time you have left. Huh? This is such a good thing for an author, for a writer, because sometimes they go on and on and on. So maybe I should read this thing, a passage about the hills of Madhya Pradesh. So, so I'll start from being nervous while doing the ride itself. So I'm already at the hills of Madhya Pradesh and I'm waiting for these hills of Madhya Pradesh to start because I feel like this is the most challenging part of it. And I tried to set the same steady rhythms thinking about Shikari. He had climbed these hills with different emotions, though the essence would have been the same. A lengthy carrier lorry stacked with long flats of iron lumbered past, and the clamor of it was tremendous. I could hear Shikari's diary being read in his own voice in my head. Now this journey was changing from plain land to thick forests and ghats. We crossed the border of Maharashtra into MP. The forests were thick and dense. We had to cycle with some difficulty. At one place we had to pedal 11 kilometers on steep ghats. It was a fantastic experience. I climbed the ghats with great easiness and of course with extra strength and energy. I am sure I could do this because of the excellent training by Sir MP Subbaya. That was Shikari from his diary. With each revolution my confidence mounted. As my legs thumped on the pedals, I thought in awe of Shikari. He had taken me from a pasty mound of flesh and molded me into something I could be proud of. He had made me larger than my limitations. Every Monday when I chatted with him after Sunday's long cycle ride, he would say, "Don't push yourself, don't overtrain. This is not the Olympics. What is going to happen when you reach Delhi?" I shrugged my shoulders. I didn't have the temerity to look that far. If you reach Delhi, is someone going to give you a medal? I knew the answer to this and shook my head. No one knows your body better than you do. and he had helped me rediscover my body. It was time to explore. I had held back long enough. Half the slope must have fallen away. It was eventide, the winds were a tonic, the sun was a slither in the sky, and the blood running in my legs was molten lead. I ratcheted up the revolutions, thundering down on the pedals, staying rooted to the saddle. It was no longer enough to stay focused on the road, measuring the ride. It was time to see how much I really possessed. What were the limits of my endurance? How far had I come, and how quick could I go? It was time to let the body loose and allow the mind to soar to new heights of surprise. I began to lean into Nautanki, willing her to work in tandem, heaving my hips into each stroke, grinding out the force. I didn't bother keeping shy of the potholes. I just aimed my front wheel at the smallest stones. It was time for reckless abandon. It was time to cycle free, without thought, without doubt. I felt I could swallow everything the road threw at me. I flew over potholes and clattered through craters but didn't pull on the brakes. It was flat out bust till my lungs burst or my heart exploded, until a muscle tore or a tendon snapped. Full throttle ahead with nothing to lose and nothing to gain except the exhilaration of gathering pace while climbing a hill slope. I let myself go, holding nothing back, and cycled as fast as my legs allowed. I didn't want reserves of energy anymore. As Nautanki and I clambered up the battered slope at top speed, or at least to my mind we did, I pretended I was Alexander Vinokourov leading the assault packs onto the slopes of the Alps for Alberto Contador. I was Andy Schleck getting hit with no teammates around, and that was where I lost the race. I was Ale Jet shooting off like a rocket. I was Marco Pantani snorting cocaine. I was Big Jan Ulrich who put on too much weight during the off-season because his appetite for life was too big. I was Eddie Merckx. I was Emil Zatopek, the human locomotive, his face made hideous by a fake grimace. I was Boris Becker flying across the grass of Queens. I was Steve Waugh with a stone face in an inexhaustible arena of self-belief. I was Rahul Dravid in the dungeons writing moving masterpieces because even he knew history was kind to kings. I was Dhanraj Pillai, swarthy and agile with the wings of the devil trapped in my heels as I streaked a white flash of uniform down a green astroturf, conducting the ball in an orchestra of my own making. I was Shelley Raphael, short and stocky limbed, thundering across the hockey fields of Bangalore. I was Shawn Michaels acting stupid and making everyone laugh. I was Saina Nehwal clambering up the pecking order. In short, I was every single sports person I had ever admired as I blew myself up on the middling slopes of Madhya Pradesh. I heard Shikari telling me over and over again, do your best in training and leave the rest to God. Ask for His graces, He will help you. Believe in Him, He will give you the strength and belief. Every time he'd mention God or ask if I believed in Him, I'd nod my head, unsure about what I believed in anymore. Not wanting to get into dead-end conversations, I played along, saying I was a Roman Catholic, when years before I'd insisted that I was merely a follower of Christ. Now I'd stopped that too, never praying, never asking for anything except when there was no other option. When everyone was helpless, I'd say prayers that demanded more than they cajoled. Prayers that were like challenges to God to prove His existence. Prayers that were more like promises extracted under the threat of eternal defiance. Out there on the hills of Madhya Pradesh, I realized I had found my God. There could only be one God for me, and He had to be human, a flesh and bones God. So as you can tell, this is not like a typical cycling book. When I wrote the book, like when you think about it, I mean, big deal. All you've done is you've cycled from Bangalore to Delhi. I mean, but is it worthy of a book, like a full book? Like I remember when I finished off the first draft and I saw how big it was, I was thinking to myself, shit, dude, you've written 150,000 words about a 22-day journey. That man, Ramachandra Raghuva, has put 60 years of the history of India into that same number of words. So, but the reason why I wanted to write the book was because I always wanted to be a writer. I mean, I quit medicine with the stated ambition of being a writer. Also, what I've learned over the last 8 years is I've learned that if you don't do something every day, you can't call yourself that. So, so I don't even call myself a writer anymore because once upon a time when people meet you and they always ask you, what do you do? I would tell them I'm a writer. Now, I don't say I'm a writer. So, because I don't do it every day. So, so the book deals with it's about cycling, it's part personal memoir, and it's about the people you meet on the road, which is the most fascinating thing of it all. The kind of people you met. Oh yeah, I think, speaking about the people you meet and it being really fascinating, Keshav, आपने picture दिखाया मेरा? दिखा दे यार.
पूरा देश देख रहे हो कैसा है?
हमारा देश और मेरे को भी नहीं मालूम था हमारा देश इतना सुंदर है।
अपना देश तो एक ही है ना।
देश तो एक ही है लेकिन जाते हैं अलग अलग हैं। 28 राज्य है ना भारत में, अलग अलग प्रकार के हैं।
मैंने 6 राज्य को पार किया हूँ।
अच्छा, आपने तो उससे आगे क्या करोगे?
मैं गेम्स देखूंगा।
गेम्स देख के फिर कहाँ जाओगे आप? फिर से चालू करोगे क्या?
अभी तक तय नहीं हुआ, अगर दोबारा करूँगा तो मेरे साथ आएगा।
कौन? मैं नहीं जाएगा।
क्यों? इतने सुंदर देश है, तू भी आके देख ले। पूछ रहा था ना हमारा देश कैसा है, मेरे आंख से देखो।
यही हुए यही मर जाएंगे।
ऐसे क्यों बोल रहा है?
ऐसा ही बोल रहा हूँ। क्या हमारी इतनी वही नहीं है पर्सनैलिटी के हम ऊपर बढ़ सकें? पैसा नहीं है, गरीब लोग हैं हम।
क्या करता है?
मजदूरी।
मजदूरी कितना लगता है? कितना कमाता है?
मैं 50 रुपया।
50 रुपये। तेरी उम्र कितना है?
15।
कब से काम कर रहा है?
2 महीने से।
2 महीने से। तो 2 महीने से पहले क्या कर रहे थे?
पढ़ता था,
पढ़ाई सब कुछ छोड़ दिया?
बंद कर दिया। क्यों? इसलिए पैसा नहीं है घर में, कौन पढ़ाएगा?
लेकिन सरकारी स्कूल में फ्री है ना?
पैसे मांगते हैं ना एडमिशन कराएगी।
ये कितने मांगते हैं?
600 रुपया।
600 रुपये नाम निकालने के लिए?
हाँ।
तेरा इच्छा क्या है लाइफ में करने के लिए?
लाइफ में बहुत कुछ था।
बहुत कुछ था। क्या था?
बहुत कुछ करना था लेकिन समय ऐसा आ गया कि मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता।
You guys pay $50 a day. That's how much I spend on smoke for the day.
So yeah, that was one person who I met on the trip, and it was such a stark experience meeting him and hearing the wisdom that came out. That hearing, I mean, I don't know. I mean, everyone can tell what he does when he speaks about his circumstances. But I was 15 when I thought about this entire idea to go on a cycle ride, and it really struck me about how fortunate I am. And throughout the entire journey, the nicest thing about doing it was when you travel on a cycle, you travel at a pace that's so slow, and people are very curious everywhere you go. They're very curious about you because you're cycling through villages, and a lot of these people have just been to the next closest city. Like there were so many people, like the further north I went, and they'd say, "Where have you come from?" And I'd say, "Bangalore." They would say, "Wo kahan pe hai?" And they'd say, "No, I've just gone to Bombay." And then and it's really funny because like people talk about it. They even talk about like I told one guy so I told him I'm from Bangalore. Then he wanted to know more, and I told him, and then he said, "Why is your Hindi so bad?" And I told him, because where I come from, we don't speak Hindi. We don't need to speak Hindi. And then he was like, "Where?" And I told him, "Karnataka." And he was like, "Haan, wo alag alag di." And he said like, yeah, that's a different country only. And then you realize like as you go from Karnataka to Hyderabad to Maharashtra to Madhya Pradesh to Uttar Pradesh, then you pop back into Maharashtra again, then you go to Uttar Pradesh and you finally roll into Delhi. You realize how we are all such different people, like, and so quickly everything changes, the language changes. Like the simple thing like ha, it was really good because the way I've always heard yes in Hindi was ha, but in Madhya Pradesh it was, in Maharashtra it was ho, in Madhya Pradesh it was how. So like these small things, and like the food, like every day whenever I moved into a new state, suddenly breakfast would become different. From like idlis in here, you'd have like puris in Andhra Pradesh, then you would have like poha in Maharashtra, and then up north you went to Madhya Pradesh and you'd get like aloo tikki and samosas over there. So like it's just, it was a very illuminating and edifying experience, and because I always knew that the trip would make me understand the country better, because I think a lot of us who sit, at least I don't know about you guys, but definitely me sitting in a city my whole life, I've grown up in a cocoon of what I believe is the actual India. And then you travel on a cycle across the country, and you go deep inside, and it's amazing. I mean, it really helps you to understand. And what I was really fascinated by, and a book deals with a lot of that, is how you begin to grow to respect people who are from the villages because they have a native organic intelligence, and so on and so forth. But anyway, I mean, I think that story was quite morbid. So I will just play a video that shows. So the whole trip I would keep looking for like another great cycle. For some reason I had this idea that because it was the Commonwealth Games, there would be a bunch of cyclists traveling from all over the country going into Delhi to watch the Commonwealth Games. And I kept hoping for another cyclist because it's always nice, it's fun to cycle with someone else. So this is my favorite part of cycling throughout the entire trip of 2,200 kilometers on this cycle. This was my best part of cycling because it was with someone else. And then I'll tell you about the story behind the guy. So this is the milkman from Agra. So like all cyclists, like, they know about this thing called drafting, where if you cycle really close to the guy in front of you, you're not going to expend so much energy. So I kept waiting for the cyclist behind whom I could draft. But most of the people whom, like you said, most of the people use this to cycle to work. They're all cycling very casually. They're not interested in going, I have to finish 100 kilometers a day. Then I meet this guy and I can see him in the distance and I can see he's cycling at pace. So I quickly got up and I sat behind him. And then I began to draft, and I was feeling really tired. It was the end of the day. And then I began to speak to him, and I said, what was your name? And he said his name was, I forget his name, he said it was Vijay, I think. And that big milk can behind him, when I was cycling behind him, I saw 40 liters. I thought it was empty. Then when I asked him, I said, is your can full? He said, yeah. And then I said, why are you cycling so fast? And then he told me he had to reach Agra before sunset because all of these milk cans, they go to make the Agra peta. And he had slept in the afternoon, he had woken up late, and now he was trying to get over there, else no one would take his 40 liters of milk. So I decided, okay, fine, I will lead him out. I will make the cycling for him easier. So I got in front of him, and I wanted to see whether, he would do the same thing I did, which was just hang on behind me. And he did it without even, and then, I met Gopi Chand on the way, Saina Nehwal's coach at the time, and I wanted to meet Saina Nehwal during the trip, but I didn't get to meet her. She was number 2 in the world at that time. But I got to interview Gopi Chand. And he talked about how sports encourages a lot of, it encourages a lot of natural intelligence. And that's why I kept thinking to myself, here's a cyclist who's a milkman, carries 40 kilometers twice a day, back and forth, 40 liters, 20 kilometers every day, back and forth. And I kept thinking, without anyone training him or teaching him, he knew that it was easier to just cycle behind another cyclist. Until, of course, the camera crew kept saying, bhaga, 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 and they tried to make us race with each other. And then he went in front of me, and then I said, okay, fine, he wants to race, I'm not interested in racing, I'll sit behind him and let him do all the hard work for me. So cool, I think I've got 2 minutes left. So, there was this really nice picture of me that was supposed to be put up, but they decided not to put it up because I look so good. But that picture sparked something in the book, and if I can find it in 1 minute 30 seconds, I will read it. Security issues. So the great thing for me was, the idea was to do the trip. I can't find it. You guys buy the book and you read it. So security issues. So the idea was, I have to make this whole trip as cheap as possible, and I don't want to stay in a hotel. The idea was, I don't want it to be like I cycle from one place to the next place and sleep in a hotel. I want to sleep out in the open, speak to people, sleep in their houses, whatever. And then very early on in the trip, we realized that every village has a temple. So you go to the village, you tell them you're cycling. they're very fascinated by you because, wow, someone from the outside has come into their world. And straight away, very casually, you say, do you happen to have a village over here where we can sleep? And immediately they say, yeah, sleep in the village, give us the keys. Next morning, we return the keys. I think of the 22 nights, the most number of nights I've slept in temples. Then I've slept out in the open, slept in rice mills, slept by a riverside. I think only 2 nights I stayed in a hotel, and 3 nights I slept in a dhaba, because I began to get like really fascinated by these dhabas and these truckers in the middle of the night sleeping over there, but no security issues at all. See, that's why you should take a cycle like this. Now, if you took a 1 lakh cycle like a trek or something. Yeah, but anyway, I think I've got 20 seconds left. Thank you, everyone. Last question. Oh, dude. You have to... I've got 9 seconds. I can't spill over into the next one, but there's this part where I talk about being Jesus. So I knew it was a 20-day trip, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm like Jesus, 40 days temptation in the wilderness. Every day I cycle is like 2 days of wilderness. When I came to Hyderabad, like it was the 5th day, and I was like, dude, this is taking too long. It's only 5 days. I'm only done with 10 days of temptation. So then I devised a new plan. In fact, in the book, it talks a lot about the games you have to play mentally to keep going for 100 kilometers a day for such a long time at a stretch. But I'm really glad that there are young guys in the audience hearing the story, because the only reason why I did the trip was because one man did it in 1982, and I heard that story in 1995, and then 2010 came, I was going nowhere in life, and I said, let's go to Delhi. Cool, thanks. Thanks, everyone.